Alright, in this video we're going to look at making an animated album cover. Now we've probably seen these on Spotify and Apple Music where the album now actually has a little bit of animation to it, which is pretty cool. Visually appealing, very engaging, and just adds this whole new level of kind of interest to these album covers, which now digitally we can do. So what we're going to do, we're going to start off with that. So now what I have researched is that the covers for some reason are 4,000 by 4,000, which is pretty big, and I'm not looking to do that. And I'm sure that even if we get to 2,000 by 2,000, that would work out fine. So in my new composition that I just click on here, we can go to composition and new composition. Let me show you that as well. Composition, new composition, same thing, Command N, and I'm just going to call this album cover. And what I can do now is I'm going to actually make this my own custom. So 2000 by 2000 is what I'm looking for. Square pixels, 24 frames per second. We'll start off with the resolution full. Now here we might have to change it as our animation goes because things can get a little laggy depending on your computer and how well it actually, the RAM previews work. You might have to change that up a little bit. Now the minimum amount of time I want is 20 seconds. I definitely want to play around with maybe slower animations. You can definitely do a lot of quicker animations, but I definitely want it to be played out a little bit longer here just to see how that goes. Okay. I'm going to keep my background color white because we are going to add in our own backgrounds, whatever you want to do, but we're definitely going to add in something for our backgrounds. And it could be a picture, which is kind of where I'm leaning towards, but you could also make the picture yourself. It's entirely up to you. So what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to say, okay, I'm happy with that. Those are my specs. Everything looks good. And that's it. So here I am. Now what I'm going to do, I've kind of already made an album cover a little bit here, but I'm just going to start from scratch just so I could show you what I did here. So realistically, have all my normal panels open. My album cover composition is there. What I'm going to do first off is two things. Number one, I did need to bring in a picture for my background, and I'm also going to bring in a texture layer that I'm going to overlay over top of the whole thing and kind of add a little bit of interesting texture using a blending mode. So let me actually bring in both the images is in first. But first what I need to do is organize them. I need to organize everything in my organized folder. So let's do that. I'm going to click on my desktop, new folder, and what am I going to put in that new folder? First of all, I'm going to name it properly. Let's just call this, actually, you know what? I'm going to name this properly as if I was submitting this. Last name, first initial, section number, and this one is called album cover. So let's do that because we could just zip this later if we're entirely done with it and happy with everything in there. And I'm just going to open it up. Great, so there it is. Now I'm going to make a new folder, and I'm going to call this one the AEP. So the After Effects project is going to go in there. We're just going to do that in just a little bit. I'm also going to make a new folder called my assets. All right, and I'll make another folder called final because my final will go in there as well. All right, so what I want to do now is just I'm going to click and drag my two pictures that I've downloaded from before. One I got from Unsplash, the texture, and the sky I believe from there as well. A little great resource, unsplash.com, really great pictures. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring these in now because they're properly linked. They're in my folder. I'm going to want to link them in properly so that if they move, After Effects will know where they are. Or sorry, I'm not going to move them, but After Effects will know where they are. I'll know where they are in my projects. Always really good to organize and link ourselves and name them properly too so we know exactly what they are. Not just untitled or anything like that. So what I can do here, a couple different ways. I'm going to do this two different ways just to show you. I'm just going to click and drag, and they are JPEGs, which is fine. I'm just going to click and drag and bring one into the project panel. There it is right there. And just another way to do it, I could either double click here or just go to File and Import, File. And I'm going to bring in my other one. I'm going to go look for it. There it is, desktop. There is my album cover, my assets, and realistically, I could also name this folder graphics. I can make a new folder in here called graphics and put those in there. But right now, this particular project is only going to be graphics I'm going to be using. I'm not adding audio. I'm not adding video. I'm not adding anything else really. So I'm really only just going to make a folder, assets, and bring these graphics in there. So my other one, I'm just going to click on texture. It's not in there yet. I'm going to press open. Great, and it should be there too. Now the first thing I want to do, I'm going to clean up and really organize my project panel. So I'm going to add a folder. I'm going to call it comps. So my one comp will go in there. I'm going to click and drag that comp in there. Perfect. And I'm going to make a new folder, and I'm going to I'll call this one graphics. Okay, they're my graphics, and they're my two graphics. I'll click and drag them into my graphics panel. Great. So now I have these two, and once again, I could always just label this if I want to change up the color of these to, they're all going to be red. Sorry, I should do it like that. Hold down. I could hold down Shift and select them all, or hold down Command and select one at a time. and that one's fine. Okay, great. So now I have those there. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to click and drag my sky in first. This is going to be my background. So as I click and drag that in, it's going to appear, and it should appear right in the center. If I drag it into the here, I can move it around, but if I drag it right into the layer panel, it shows up like that. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to press enter, and I'm just going to call this background. I like to label those obviously right away. I click on it, press enter, and I type it in. You could also right click and rename if you need to as well. All right, there I go. I'm going to bring my texture a little bit later, because right now what I want to do is command minus. I'm going to zoom out in my viewport. I'm just going to shrink this down, hold down shift. It's going to shrink from the middle. Great. Kind of want to play with it right there. You can play around with however you want to do it. Now for me and for this particular project, I do want you to pick a band or musician, an artist, anything that you like. Just pretend you're making an album cover for them, something that hasn't been created yet, maybe their next album, maybe an album you want to recreate. It's entirely up to you what you want to do. Now I am picking an actual band. I love the Verve, so I'm going to do it on the Verve. And actually their fourth album has this cool sky background, really interesting. So I'm going to kind of play off that and just work with that a little bit. And this image definitely works with that. So it is their fourth album. So the name of the album is Fourth, and the name of the band is the Verve. So I want you to do the same thing where you're going to have a name of an artist or band or something, and you're going to have the name of the album as well, and you can put an other type as well. So this particular project focuses heavy on kinetic typography. I want to see a lot of typography, or at least play with that typography. Now I'm asking you to do quite a few things here, so if it kind of looks a little too much, that is something we don't really want to do necessarily for an actual album cover. But for this project, I definitely want you to play around and have some fun with it. So if you do an extra little bit here and there, that's okay, because I definitely want you to play around and learn a little bit more about After Effects. So here's my background layer. That's great. If I'm done with it, I could actually lock it, but I'm going to animate a little bit with my background layer too, but I'm going to do that a little bit later. So what I can do now is I do need to bring in some type, and I do want that to be kinetic type, and it's going to have a bit of animation on it as well. So the few types of type I want you to edit and play around with is type on a path, some range selector, a stroke reveal, and some 3D animation as well. So let me actually play around with a stroke reveal first. Now I've shown this before, but let's see how this works here. So I'm actually going to type in. So I'm going to click on the text of the type tool, and I'm just going to click. And as soon as I click, it shows up here in my layer panel as empty text layer. But as soon as I start clicking, I'm going to type in the Verve. There I go. I already have a nice typeface set up Avenir, so I'm just going to use that throughout. I could actually shrink it down right here. If I click on everything and just shrink it down, scrub here, and it'll shrink down. If I hold down shift, it shrinks even faster. And if I hold down command, it shrinks very slowly. So that's another little tip there. If you scrub and hold down shift, it goes very fast. The increments increase quite a bit. If I hold down command I'm on a Mac, potentially control on a PC, it goes very slow. The increments are much less. So that's kind of a good thing to know there too. So I'm just going to bring that up a little bit. I'm going to center that. So right now the anchor point is not in the center of this particular little text frame. So what I can do is hold down command and double click the anchor point tool, or this pan behind tool, and all of a sudden the anchor point goes right in the middle. That's great. So now what I could do as well, go to my line panel, and I can center if this is where I want to be. Now I can move it around later. It's not a big deal. And especially for this particular animation, I'm just going to bring it up. Now, what I want to do here is I want a stroke reveal. I want this to be kind of revealed by a stroke. So as it kind of looks like someone's drawing it on kind of ideally. And once I'm done, you'll understand what it looks like, but this is kind of the way to do that. The way to do this, we have to be very specific here, because I'm going to show you something that has to be, that happens with the shape tool and the pen tool. So if I already have something selected on the layer panel, what's going to happen when I click on my pen tool, which is what I'm going to use, all of a sudden my cursor has this little square with a black circle in the middle. That means it's a mask. Because I have something selected, I automatically, when I click on my pen tool, will start creating a mask on that particular layer. Now, if I don't want to make a mask, I would click off of that layer and I could just start clicking, and look what happened. As soon as I brought my pen tool to the composition viewport, it turns into a star, which means I'm going to just make a shape. But I don't want that for this particular situation, and the same goes for the shape layer here. So if I grab on the circle, it looks like, okay, I'm about to make a mask because, whatever I do. And let me show you really quickly what happens. So if I click and drag, well, I've just made a mask. And that's exactly what happens. Well, I didn't want that necessarily. I want to actually click on the pen tool, and here's where I want to make the mask. I have my layer selected. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start covering up and making strokes that cover up each individual almost stroke, realistically, a downstroke, and I'm going to make a new one, and then a new one, and then a new one, and I'm going to keep on going, and I'm going to actually use an effect to help us create that. So let's actually look at this. Here we go. So I'm going to start creating a mask. I have this selected, have my pen tool selected. I'm just going to click and drag. I'm going to hold down shift to keep it in line. I'm going to try to find that middle point of all these letters. Now, if you have a different typeface, click and drag makes it curve. If you have a different typeface, it might be trickier, it might be harder, but that's okay. As you go through this, you're going to see what you need to do with yours to make it work in this same situation. So I'm just going to see, as soon as I clicked one mask shows up. That's perfect. Now what I want to do, I don't want to continue this. I just wanted one line. So what I could do, I could command click, and it stops the line from continuing, but it still lets me keep my pen tool. So I'm going to click and drag again, hold down shift. Great. Command click, let's go of that line, and now I can continue on. Now what's going to happen here too, also, the way I create my strokes will actually dictate how the animation will flow as well. But that's okay, because I'm just going to keep on here. Now if I get too close here, it's going to make a plus sign, because it's going to add an anchor point to it. So I don't really want that, so I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to get close to it, but I don't want to get right on it, so I'm just going to click there, click and drag. And you could always actually fix these up later, and actually when you get to the point of where you need it to, where the animation is going to happen, you can actually change it up there as well too. So we're just going to carry on here. Now, just to show you this part, what I don't want to have happen is I don't want to actually complete a whole shape, because if I complete a whole shape, it creates a full mask. I don't want that. So if you have an O or something like that where it actually complete, come very close to it. You don't actually have to finish it off. See how when I come to the start point, my cursor has a little circle on it. It means it's about to complete a shape. Well, I don't want that. So you could actually step away a little bit from it, and it'll still work for what we're trying to achieve here. So look what I did. Every single stroke of each of the letter forms has a mask on it. Now it kind of looks weird, it just looks like a path, which is totally fine. It's all you need to do, because we're going to go now one step further. Let me bring this up a little bit. And what I want to do now, I just want to select all my masks. I'm going to click on my top one, I'm going to hold down shift and click on my bottom one. So this one happens to have 16 masks, so there's 16 strokes that were made, 16 paths. That's great. So now what I want to do, I'm going to add an effect here, okay? So I'm going to go to my effects presets. I'm going to type in stroke, because it's going to generate strokes. So where am I here with generate? I'm going to click on, there are a lot of stroke options, but I just want to click on generate stroke. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to click and drag that onto my layer. I could also just double click it. I'm going to make sure all my layers are selected, and in the effects control panel shows up. And now what I could do is I can actually play around here. So let's take a look. Number one, I want my path to have all the masks used. Not just one or a few, I want all the masks. Great. The next thing I need to do, and this is the part where you could tweak it, so I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. The next thing you can do is actually the brush size. So I'm going to increase the brush size. So now what happens is it's kind of covering up all my shapes. Now this is going to go away, so don't worry about that, but I want to make sure that it covers the letter forms. Now everything's white, so let me change the color of this just so I can tell it's covering. So I'll say okay, change the color of that. Now if I have a little less, if I go a little less and some of that's covering, it's not going to work if it's not fully covering the letter. So what I want to make sure that it's fully covering the letter forms. So if I have an issue where I need to tweak something, I could always go back and tweak it. Let's just say with my pen tool here, or my selection tool here, say, I had an issue with a particular mask. Say this one wasn't working quite well. Let me lock my background. So say this one was giving me a bit of an issue. I can move it around. I can fix the individual anchor point and move it if I need to move it, just to make sure it fits properly. But that's looking good. Everything seems to be covered really, really well. But if I needed to, I could, or I can increase the brush size. Either way, that can work. Now the animation, how this is actually going to happen, the color does not matter. I'm going to bring that down a little bit. The effect is here as well. So any effect you actually apply comes to your effects control, and it also applies to the actual layer, and you can see everything that's here. You'll see everything here, but here you might actually find it is a little bit easier to see. It's entirely up to you. So what I want to do now is I want to animate this. So I'm going to click on my start. Now I could animate it down here or up here, but I'm just going to animate it here because I'll see the keyframes right here. So I'm going to click on my start animation. Now here it is. My first keyframe shows up, which is great. I have it on reveal original image. So I've changed it there. Now I want my original starting point. So right here, the CTI is at 0% or 0 frames right at the beginning. And right now I can see everything, and I kind of don't want that. I actually want nothing to be seen. So I'm going to bring this down to 0%. So the start is going to be 0% of everything. I'm going to bring my CTI up to wherever I want. I can always change it later. And now when I click, I'm going to scrub it to 100%. And now this is what we should see. I'm going to press the space bar. So it's revealing the type. So this is how we do it. There's a little involved obviously with the masking and everything, but once you generate the stroke, it's pretty easy to work with. And that's it. So there's our generation there. Very good. And if I did the opposite, let me do an opposite one. Let me kill these keyframes. I'm going to do the end just to show you the difference. So I'll click on end. And right now it's at 0%. And I can move it to the 3%. And I'm going to make it 100%. So let's see what that does. Same idea. Okay, so we could play around with that as well. And let me do a little one extra. I'm going to click on that, and I'm just going to do, just to show you the difference, I'm going to click on, right click on them, keyframe assistant, time reverse keyframes. Let's see what that does. So it just does the opposite. It kind of takes it away. So just to show you the opposite there, so I'm just going to do this again one more time. Bring it back here. Click on the start. Remember, it's on reveal original image as opposed to on original image, which was the default. And my start is going to be 0. And at the 3-second mark or wherever it is, I'm going to bring it up to 100%. And there's the animation that I want. Now, once again, if I want this to happen much faster, bring the keyframe in. Closer to the other keyframe, much faster, even faster. Okay. Now, if I wanted to prolong it, but not too long, we can play with that too. Okay, so I'm going to bring that in. And now another thing we could do, obviously, we could easy ease these as well. We could right click and keyframe assistant and easy ease, or we could use the keyboard shortcut F9, which for me it's function F9 because my F keys are a little bit different. So there's the easy ease that happened. And now what that does, it kind of goes slow, fast, slow. If I really want to fine tune that, I can select them, go to my graph editor, and here it is on the speed graph. Make sure you're on the speed graph, edit speed graph. I could click on those, and now these little keyframes that showed up, they have these little control arms here as well. I could bring them in, click and drag, bring them in. And now I'm saying go slow, go really fast, and then come back slow again. Ease in, slow, go fast, ease out, slow. And let's see what that looks like. Kind of like that. Now that's a little too much, so let me change it up just a little bit. Pretty cool. I like it. So click off my graph editor. I'm back onto my main timeline. I'm going to zoom out a little bit here. I'm going to play this one more time. Very nice. So that's my first kind of idea what I might want to play with my stroke reveal, but I'm going to continue on playing around here. So now what I want to do, I'm going to show you a few different ways to use that same type, but to do a few different things with it. So my stroke reveal has been shown. Now I'm going to play around with type on a path. So now you might use this, you might not. I definitely want to see some type of type on a path happening here. So let me at least show you how to do it once, and then let me show you something you might potentially use. But hopefully you are creative enough and play around with this and see what works for you. So the type on the path works the same way. It uses a mask as well, but it's really, really simple to do. So what I'm going to do first, once again, I'm going to create some type. I'm going to type in the same thing. Let's pretend I'm going to use the word again, the verb. It depends on how you want to do this, but I definitely want to see quite a few different types of kinetic typography here. Once again, I'm going to press Command, double click on the anchor point tool, and it goes right in the middle. I just like to have it there. I think it works much better to have it in the center. Okay, that's all I'm going to do now with my type selected, with this one selected. I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to click on the pen tool. And with the pen tool, what I could do, once again, it's on the mask, right? It's about to create a mask. It shows me the cursor saying, yeah, you're about to create a mask because you clicked on the pen tool and you have a layer selected. I'm just going to make a quick path. Click and drag, doesn't matter. I'm just going to drag it out just to show you what I can do. So I made a path. I didn't complete it. It's just one path line. It's not a complete shape. That's it. That's all I needed to do. And now I see that, yeah, the mask is there. Mask 1, just like I did before. Mask, great. But what I'm going to do now is really simple. To attach that type to that mask as it's on a path, I'm just going to click on the text, twirl down the text, go to path options. In the path, I'm just going to say connect it to mask 1. And that's it. It automatically connects to it. Now to animate it, that's all I have to do is click on the first margin and animate that over. So if I scrub that, see how it moves? That's it. That's type on a path, and you can move it any way you want. You can make the path any kind of path you want. So let's do a quick animation of that. So I'm just going to say I'm going to make a animation here, and then I'm going to bring it, I'm going to scrub it all the way down. Remember, if I hold down shift, it scrubs faster. If I hold down command, it scrubs slower. So there I am, and then I'm just going to have it appear a little bit later on, maybe at the 3-second mark, and I'm going to scrub it now this way, and there we go. Scrub it over, and that's it. Done. Animation is done. That's what it's doing. Once again, I can ease it. I can do a few different things with this. I can prolong it. I can make it go a little faster. Whatever I want to do, entirely up to you. Now that is kind of, you know, it's all right. You can totally do that. It's interesting. Or I'm going to show you another little option here, and this one's kind of cool. And what I'm going to do here, I'm actually going to label these. I want to label these what they actually are. So the verb, and this is stroke reveal. I might use this. So you could even do a bunch of different options and say, you know what, I like this over the other, but I definitely need you to check off all the things I wanted you to show me on this. And this one, it's the verb again, but this time it's going to be, you know, type, let's say type path. Okay, great. I'm going to do this one more time. Let's try a type on a path. This one's actually kind of interesting. Majority of you might have figured this out too, how to do it, but let me just play around. So I'm just going to shut these ones off because there is a lot going on right now. So I'm going to, I'm going to type the verb again. Actually, I was going to try something a little bit different. I'm just going to play around with, like, as if this is the official release. You could type in anything you want. I'm going to make this all caps. There I go. I'm going to shrink it down a bit. Hold down shift to keep it in line, to keep it all proportional. And right here, that's fine. I'm happy with that because I'm going to play around with this later. So what I want to do now, once again, with the layer selected, I'm going to click on the shape tool this time. And I'm just going to right click, hold on my right click, and I can choose anything I want. But what I'm going to choose is the ellipse tool. And I'm just going to click and drag a circle. But you're going to see that it's on it obviously has a mask. I'm going to click and drag a circle. Does not matter the size. I can play around with it anytime I want. So right about there, I'm happy with that. I'm holding down shift to keep it a perfect circle. There I go. I'm going to move it. I can move it around. It shows, obviously, a mask. We know what a mask does. It shows something and hides something. So right now it's showing this wherever I want to move it. And I'm happy with that. Once again, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to twirl down text and show my path options. And I'm going to check the path to mask 1. And once again, it's a type on a path. The type is now connected to that actual path, which is great. So what I could do here is actually, I'm going to play around with this a little bit more. I'm going to add a bullet point, and I'm going to type it in again, official release. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to have it rotate on itself. That's all. Now, it's a little too big. It doesn't fit. So there's a couple of things I could do here. If I play with changing up the size of the overall thing, the whole overall, because I want to make that type, it's overlapping, it's not right. Well, what's going to happen is I'm going to hold down shift and everything changes. It does, not just the mask becomes bigger, the type and the mask become bigger. So a way to work with that is actually, if I click on the path itself and then double click, what I can do, it will actually get this bounding box going, and I could actually make just the mask bigger. Hold down shift, and that works too, but that's not necessarily what I need to do. I could also just make the type smaller, which is kind of what I'm going to do. So here I am. I still have it. It says, oh, I spelled that wrong there. So try to spell these things right, obviously. There we go. And I'm going to put another bullet point. So you know what? The type is still a little too big. So very easily, Command A, because the type is selected, I could just bring down the point size right here. And I could play around with how I want it to fit. Do I want it to overlap? Do I want something very interesting there? Entirely up to you. I'm going to make it fit right about there. I think that works, and I'm happy with that. And that's it. Done. Now I have that. Now let's pretend, yeah, you know, that is a little bit big for my overall composition, especially if I want to bring it down for some reason. I'm going to hold down shift and make it smaller, a little too small. I'm going to need to zoom in just to be on the safe side. I'm going to bring it here, just showing you some stuff. That's it. I'm not saying this is going to be my final composition at all, but what I can do, once again, first margin, last margin, I could just move these around. So there's my first margin. I'm going to make a stopwatch, make a keyframe. So this is my first animation, my first point of animation. And I'm just going to say that's fine. I'm going to move it over here. And what I kind of want to do here is I want to remember, because I'm going to loop this, and this might be overwhelming in terms of the actual overall animation, looking at this thing constantly moving, but I definitely want to show you how to do it. Super simple, it's really easy, but it adds an expression, which is something it's good to know. So there I am. And what I can do now, at this point, let's say I'm going to add another first margin, but I kind of want to remember where that circle is as I push it. So I'm just going to remember it's kind of there. I could always fix it up later, so I'm just going to move it. I'm going to hold down shift to move it faster. So there's the first one, and then there's the second one. We're kind of coming back, quite frankly, full circle. There I go. So it's kind of pretty close. Let's see how that goes. Yeah, nice. Okay. I'm going to move that over just a little bit because I think it's going pretty fast. And not to say that anyone's going to read this very well. So maybe I want to slow it down just a little bit more. I'll make it 5 seconds. Okay. And let's assume it's at a good pace. That looks pretty good. If I want to go back and say, you know what, I messed it up, I spelled something wrong, you could always go back and change up something you spelled wrong. And that's it. So now what I want to do is I kind of want to say, you know what, I want this to loop. I don't want it to stop. I want it to keep going through the whole animation, the full 20 seconds. I want it to not stop, but what happens when I put it there, it stops. Now, what if I just bring it all the way to the end? Well, that's fine, but now it's going to go super duper slow. It's kind of not what I wanted, but I could do that too. What I'll say is, like, you know, let's make it 8 seconds. It goes pretty decent. It's readable. That's good, but I want it to kind of continue even though it stops, or I want it to continue animating. Well, that's really simple. There's an expression we can use. It's called loop out, and it'll just continue the animation no matter what, as long as the video is. So what I have to do is hold down Option on the stopwatch, and it says you're about to kind of do something here. Hold down Option, click on it, and now my expression shows up. And there's already something here. Now I'm not going to mess with that code. What I am going to do after the code, I'm just going to press enter, and I'm going to type loop. And some expressions already show up. I'm just going to say loop out, and I'm just going to double click on it, and that's all I needed to press. Loop out. There I go. Come back, and I could actually throw that back so I don't have to see the expression. And now what happens when I move through this animation, what normally would happen, it would stop here, but what's going to happen when that circle gets back, it's going to continue on. Now there was a little bit of a glitch there. We saw a little bit of that. So what I could do at this point, I can kind of bring it back just a little bit, because if there was a problem there, now I can still fix that animation. Oh, I was at the wrong point. I gotta move that CTI and make sure it's correct. So it was either a little bit forward or a little bit backward. That still looks pretty good. You could always fix up your animation. So that's it. So it keeps on looping even though the animation stopped here. It keeps looping because we had that really cool expression there that helps out. Very simple. Okay, that's it. So that's another way to do type on a path. So let me click on that as well. Official release, and I'm going to press enter, and I'm just going to say and this is type path as well. Okay, good. So I have another option there. Like I said, there's a lot I'm going to do, but you choose what you want. But I definitely want to see quite a few pieces of animation here. Kinetic Typography, which just means moving type, which is great. Okay, so I have this, I have that, I have a few different things. I'm probably not going to use this type on a path. I might just keep this one here for now. And you know, once again, maybe I'm not happy with the overall type. Maybe I need to, because of the contrast here, maybe I do want to bring it down. I can change it up. And you know what? Maybe I could just grab the eyedropper here and make it a certain color that I like from the sky here. And I'll just bring it down. Oh, that was interesting. I can play around with the individual path. It's not what I want to do. I just want to move this whole thing down. Give me a bit of a hard time. So let's just use my arrow keys. Okay, let's just pretend that's where it's going. Who knows? Who knows what the end will be? It's always good to thumbnail this out, draw it. Hey, this is what I want the end result to be, which there should be a culmination to the end. So there should be a 2D static version of this where not necessarily nothing's happening, but this is the final composition, and it should stay on screen for a while. So it's not always moving. There's not always some kind of animation. It's just it's slow, it's nice, and it's easy. So that was type on a path. Now we're going to get into the range selector. So here's another option. what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to bring in my type maybe in a certain way. Maybe I'm going to shut this off right now and I'm going to type it in again, but this time I'm going to play with it in a slightly different way. Type in the verb. I'm going to, that's okay. I'll do that one more time. There we go. Select it all, Command A, shut that off. I'll make it white. All right. So the way this works with the range selector is, once again, I'm going to hold down Command, double click there. It's in the center. This is where I want it to be. So my resting position is right here. So what's going to happen is I'm going to have it fly in from the top, and each letter individually is going to be animated. So the way I have to do that, I'm going to twirl down my layer. I'm going to click on text, and right here it says animate, so I can do some animation with this particular one here. And what I want to do, I could actually do a lot, which I'm going to add to this. I'm just going to do one simple range selection, which you don't really see it yet, animation. So I'm going to click on position. So what happens, I can animate very specific things with text, which is great. So what shows up? Path options are there, more options. Now this new one shows up, animator 1, and under animator 1 is range selector. I could actually select a range of where I want the type and how I want it to come in and different things like that. Let me show you what I mean as I do this. And there's the position animation that I'm about to set. But you're like, well, there's a position animation there, but there's also transform, and that's still there too. Position is there too. This is slightly different because this position just pertains to this range selector. This position still exists. It still works, obviously. But this one is going to be specific to the range selector. I'm about to show you exactly what it does. So right now, this is my resting position right here. Perfect. What I want to have happen is I want my type, and I could bring it up manually or use this. I want my type on the y-axis to come in from the top. Hold on Shift. I'm going to say right there. So what's happening now, I moved it, but nothing really happened. I just kind of brought my type up there. But what's going to happen is the type is going to come down on its own accord from this animation. I just got to say where I want it to start, end, or offset. What I'm going to do, I'm going to use a start animation. So I'm just going to click on start as my current animation, and I'm just going to move it over my CTI to create a new keyframe, and I'm just going to go to 100%. And you already saw the animation of what's kind of happening there. Okay, cool. So that's kind of it. I'm just going to bring it back, and now it's kind of flying in like that. Pretty cool. And once again, I could do a nice little select those. I could do a easy ease by F9 or right click in keyframe assistant, easy ease. And now it's going to go slow, fast, slow, slow, a little faster, and then a little slow. And once again, I can use the graph editor to go back and fix it. It's entirely up to you. Now that's one way to do it. Okay, so I just wanted to show you that. And the other way I'm actually going to duplicate this to show you a few different ways. I'm going to Command D and duplicate this layer. I'm going to shut the last one off, twirl down this one. Now instead of doing it this way, I just want to show you another option here as well. I'm going to twirl down my animator 1, range selector 1, and I'm going to shut off these ones, or just get rid of it. I'm going to do an end animation. So same idea. I'm going to click on end, and it's going to be there, which is fine. And now I'm going to go here to 3 seconds, and this time I'll make it 0%. So now what happens? Oh, sorry. Now what happens? It starts from the end. It's already there. Now it's going away. Now that could be something interesting too that you might want to try out. And I'm going to get rid of that because the last one I want to show you is the offset. And what we need to see with the offset, we actually need to see it. So I'm going to bring this back down. And I just want to show you what the offset does. So now the offset, I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. So the offset actually uses our start indicator and our end indicator to say, you know what, I want to bring in, maybe 2 letters at a time or something like that. Oh, there I go. I'm going to bring my position back to 0 just to show you. I could change it later. So I'm going to see my start indicator. Sorry, my start indicator and my end indicator. So my end indicator is going to come in right there. There we go. It's on the opposite side. So this one here, I could actually move it manually myself if I want to move it back and forth. That's great. What I'm telling this is I want you to actually offset them. I don't want you to do 1 at a time. Maybe I want you to do 2 letters at a time, or 3 characters at a time, or 4, which is totally great. So right now, let's do 3 at a time. So that's it. So now I'm actually going to do an offset animation. So here we go. I'm going to bring it down to the beginning. Now my offset is going to do just this. Watch what happens when I scrub the offset. That's what it moves. That's how it moves. Great. So let me zoom out. Let me bring that position back up to the top, all the way to the top. There we go, roughly about there. Now let's see how this works. If I scrub my animation, that's more or less what's going to happen. Okay, so now it doesn't do it letter by letter, it kind of does it few letters at a time, because I said, you know, do 3 letters at a time. So that's how the offset works, and you could always play around with it. It's pretty cool. So let's actually do an offset animation here. So here I am, I'm going to click on my offset, and I'm going to bring it all the way back to right about here, where both are at the beginning. Both my start and end indicators are at the beginning. Great, so it's minus 86%. I'm going to bring it up to the maybe 3-second mark again, like I've normally done, and I'm going to bring now my offset all the way to the opposite end. So both of my indicators are at the end, and that's the end of my animation. There I go, that's it. So you could do a start animation, an offset animation, or you can do a end animation. However you kind of wanted to see it go down, that's entirely up to you how you wanted that to happen. Okay, so there's just a few different options. I am going to shut this one off. I kind of like the way this one looked. So what I'm going to do now with this particular range selector, which was just that first one I did where things just kind of came in, which was great. What I'm going to do, I'm going to add a little more to it. I'm going to add another animation to it. Now the good thing about this, the animation's already done. That's all I have to do is like add another animation, another property, and it's just going to happen. So I'm going to say, let's say opacity. So there it is at the bottom of position, which it already was there. And that's all I have to do is maybe go halfway through the animation, and I'm just going to bring it down, shut it off. Now what's going to happen, they're going to kind of come in with low opacity, then they're going to come into 100% opacity. The animation's already there, so I don't have to add any keyframes, it's already there. Now once again, if I want to add more properties, I can. Let me add in a blur. Okay, so I'm going to start off, and it's going to come in. The blur is going to be, let's go about halfway so I can see what's going on. I'm going to bring in a blur that is going to be, let's see how that goes. Okay, so it's opacity, there's a blur, there's the position change, so there's plenty of stuff I can do, and it's looking pretty good. I'm kind of liking what it's doing. It looks nice, a nice little ease in there as well. So there's so many things you could add to the range selector: rotation and scale, even skew, tracking. You could change the color of it if you wanted. Entirely up to you what you want to do, okay? Because there's a lot you could play with here. So just wanted to show you that's another way to add in some kinetic typography to this. So this one I'm just going to call the verb, and this one was a range selector. And this one was a range selector as well, but you know what, I might not use that one, but at least I know it's there if I want to go back and play around with that one. Okay, but you know what, I probably should at least label it. Okay, and that's it. So now I can do that. I've done some range selection, and I can play around with so many things with the range selector too. And I have another video specific to range selector. But what I want to do now is look at now some 3D animation. So how do we play around with 3D? So let me use now another piece of type. Let me use the name of the album. The name of the album is Fourth. So let me actually type out Fourth. So new layer shows up. Now the way they spelled fourth was this way, even though it's their fourth album, but the idea is like they're kind of moving forward, so going forth. I'm going to, once again, command click that. It's in the middle. Maybe I'll put it down here. So many different ways to play around with this in terms of the composition. And this might actually help you. Playing with After Effects might actually help you rethink how composition works, how layout works, how you want to do that. So here I am. So what I want to do is I do want to play around with some 3D space here. So how do we work with 3D space? Well, number one, we need to make this available in 3D space. So this little widget here, this layer, I can actually click on this, which is a 3D layer. So now I'm going to say this type is going to be 3D. Now look what happens. I get my X and Y. This is called a gizmo, my X, Y, and Z. So normally, if I got rid of that 3D, let me get rid of it. I'm going to bring my transform up, and my transform is great. My normal X and Y, this is great. Now if I click on 3D, I now get a Z, an extra Z, and now I also get these rotation options. orientation here, my X, Y, and Z rotation. Now remember, Y is vertical, X is horizontal. Now the Z is coming right at you. It's coming towards you. Now here's a great way to see what's actually happening in the 3D space by clicking on this active camera. Let's click on active camera and go to custom view 1. So what I'm actually seeing, well, it's unfortunate you can't see much because it's white on white. Well, you know what I'm going to do? Just to make this a little bit easier to see, I'm going to actually make this sky 3D as well. I'm not going to do anything with it. I'm just going to keep it as is. But if I make it 3D, what happens in my custom 3D camera view, I could actually now see it. And now this makes a little bit more sense. So only things that are 3D, which happens to be this and this, are able to be seen in a 3D camera. Okay, oh, didn't mean to do that. That's okay. I'll go back to custom view 1. There we go. So I can see that now I can also see how it's going to animate in 3D. So let's actually play around with that. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to scrub and see the different things I could do. So my anchor point, if I move the Z, so the anchor point can move. I can move my position, once again, very similar. Anchor point can move. I can scale it up that way, but not much is going to happen there. Orientation, so let's see how we can... Oh, that's pretty interesting. Okay, so what I'm going to do here, just so I could see that properly, I'm going to actually move the position up a little bit. All right, and then I'm going to do a little orientation. Maybe, don't really want to see that. Maybe I'm just going to play with the X rotation. I'm going to make it look like it's kind of coming up out of nowhere. So let's try that out. So I'm going to go back to my normal view. So at least now you have an understanding of how that 3D works. Go back to my active camera, and I'm going to do a little orientation here. So I'm going to do a stopwatch orientation. I'm going to do a little animation with that. I'm going to have it go start at kind of nothing, which would be right about there. I could always play around with that, fine tune that. And then I'm going to bring it up a little bit more. And now I'm going to make that to be back to 0. So let's see what that animation does. So this is what we would consider a 3D animation, in a sense that it's using 3D space and it's working within that space, as if it's kind of using that Z axis to kind of work with as well. So that's how we can use some 3D effect, which is pretty cool as well. So hopefully there's something you can do with that, with using 3D space, which is also a part of this project, to create something interesting there. Now, another thing we can do, so I'm just going to label that properly as well. 4th and 3D. Okay. Another one I'm going to do is I'm going to make that again, but this time I'm going to do another kind of range selector, but with 3D. And it's called per character 3D. So I'm going to actually do something very similar. So I'm going to make a new layer again, call it 4th. Okay, there it is. Bring it in the center. There I go. If I need to align it, I can. Just go to my align panel. Once again, if you don't see some of these panels open, just go to window and you'll see all the panels you need right there. I'm going to center. Maybe bring that down just a little bit more. Okay, so now what I want to do is go to my text, twirl it down, and I'm going to click on animate. But this time I'm going to say enable per character 3D. So now what it's going to do, actually before I do that, right now, let's even just make this 3D. There it is. It's 3D, looks good, and I can animate it as a 3D as well, transform, and I can, play around, as I just mentioned, with that 3D space, which is great. But now if I enable per character 3D, what happens is each individual character can now be animated separately, not just as an entire word or line or paragraph, whatever I had. So let's play around with that. Let's animate and let's do a position animation, just with our range selector like we did before. But this time, what I'm going to really do, I'm not even going to mess around with this too much. I want to play around with the orientation here per character. So let's see what happens. Oh, sorry. Let's see what happens here. Mess around with that. Mess around with that. Okay. So what I wanted to see was, that's what I wanted to do. I want to do the position, which is fine. But I'm actually going to click on that. And let's click on rotation. That's what I wanted to see. Sorry. So the separate rotations for the range selector, I could change here. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to scrub and see what I can do here. Great. I'm going to leave it at that. And now I'm going to do a start animation and see what happens. All right, there we go. So my start is going to kind of start from there, but it's going to be per character, each one individually. All right, so let's do a start animation. It's already there. And I'm going to move it over 3 seconds. And now I'm going to bring it up to 100%. And there's my 3D animation, but per character, as opposed to the word individually. The word, sorry, separately on its own. Now I can go a little step further. Let me go halfway. Maybe there's another kind of animation I can do. Let's see what that does. Let's click that at 90. All right, let's see what this does. Well, that's kind of interesting. I don't like the way it started with it's just kind of hanging out there. But once again, we can play around with this. But let's at least say that's enable per character 3D. A lot of play there as well. And the one thing I never really mention is if I go to my advanced and I play around with some of these things, I can have some fun with these too. So right now it's based on characters. That's exactly what I was doing, but I could also base it on the word. And what should happen? The whole word, obviously. And that's kind of the whole defeats the purpose of enable 3D characters. So characters, the amount, the smoothness, the ease, a bunch of stuff I could do. But what I want to do is play with this shape, is that depending on the animation you have, this actually can change it up a little bit, ramping up, but you would have to play around with a little bit more of how it's going to work up. And if you ramp down, it's going to change that animation too and how it's coming there. All right, but you could also play around with the offset. That would actually help out quite a bit too. But just a few options there under advanced that might help you out as well. So that is fourth, and I'm going to call that per character. So per character 3D, so that's another option, but it's a range selector as well. So another way to play around with that, which is pretty fun. So that's kind of our 3D animation type situation we could play with there too. So we've played around with a lot of type, we've done some interesting things there, we've brought in our background. Now what I want to do is I do want to overlay that texture that I originally spoke about, which happens to be in our project. Now where's the project? Just got to scroll over a little bit here. It's over here, project. I'm going to bring in my texture. I'm going to bring it on the top layer. I click and drag, bring it on the top layer. There it is. Okay, now obviously it's overwhelming. It's too big, but depending on what it is, it doesn't matter because I'm going to do a little bit of blending and see what it does for me. So I'm just going to move it down, scale it down, hold down shift. There I go. Now once again, it's overlaid, but I'm not looking for that to be too much of an issue because I'm going to change the blending mode. Now, if you don't see mode, you could also right click on the heading here and go to columns and click on modes, and mode will come up. So there I go. I see mode. Great. And now look, I have all these amazing different types of blending modes I have. A lot of them we've seen very similar in Photoshop and Illustrator. Photoshop obviously having the majority of them. So let's just play around. You know, I know overlay is a very common one. So obviously it's like, wow, that's pretty cool. It's really, really affecting things. I'm going to turn on all my animations just to show what's happening with that texture. Yeah, a lot going on there. But at least I just want to see how the texture overlays and how it interferes or doesn't interfere, quite frankly. So I could play with a few different ones. The unfortunate thing here, I just can't, hover over and it changes it. I actually have to click on one each individually. Some might be too much, but that's okay. Remember, we have animation for this, so a picture can be animated. So if I don't like it, I could always change the opacity. I could bring down the opacity, say it's a little too much. If I go to full, so I can get a better understanding of what it's really going to look like. Maybe I have some of my animations already there to see how it's going to interact with those animations. And once again, I could really play around with how much I want to see and how little I want to see. So I definitely want to see you bring a texture in, something to overlay and kind of play around with. And if I wanted to, I can add an effect to this. I can change up the color. I could do whatever I want. So let's do that right now, because I definitely want you to play around with effects in this too. You only have to bring in a few effects. You can play around with them however you want, but I definitely want to see you bring in some type of effect somewhere on something. It could be a very simple effect. So let's kind of look at some of the effects we could play around with. So here on my texture, I'm actually going to bring it up all the way. Even though I still have the overlay on. I'm going to actually get rid of this. I'm going to go to my color correction, which once again, I could look at it here in this panel, or I should go to effect on this drop down here. So I could do it a few different ways. So on this, with this selected, if we go up to effect and color correction, let's just play around with hue saturation. So right now it's this particular color. It looks fine. You know what? The effect is here as well, but it also shows up here in the effects control. So let's click on that. And now I can play around with the hue, saturation, lightness. So if kind of zooming in a little bit, so I get a better sense of it, I could play around with that hue, or the saturation. If I don't want to have any color on it, I just want it to be a kind of a grayish looking one, I can do that. And I can play around with, well, everything's changing, right? Remember how everything changes because this is over top of everything. So if I want, I could actually change that to say, oh, I only want it to affect just the background, not the type. I would have to do that. That's how those blending modes work. But I'm going to bring it back to the top. I'm not going to mess with it too much, but there's my effect, and there it goes. I can always reset it. If I'm not happy with it, I could reset it. So I'm not too sure what was going on there. Either way, playing around with it a little bit. And what happens here? There we go. I'm just playing around and seeing what it does. Okay, let's even pretend I'm kind of happy with that, but remember, this is just applying it to this texture, so I could always bring down that animation, that opacity either way and get back to kind of normal. Or if I say, you know what, I want to add a little bit of that, I thought that was pretty cool, I could bring up a little bit of it and still play around with this as well. If I want to change up quite a bit more, I can bring up the opacity to get a better sense of it. Whatever I want to do. Okay, so there's a lot you could do, and once again, you're playing with the opacity, you're playing with your blending mode, you're playing with an effect. There's a lot you can do, and this is just one simple effect we could play around with. Okay, so let's even just say I'm going to bring down no saturation. There's going to be no color. It's just our black and white, or just values. Just playing around with that. So once again, bringing in that, pretty cool to play around with the blending mode, play around with an effect. Very, very simply. Say, you know what, I don't like the effect right now. I want to take it off. Shut it off. Click it off there, or click it off here. All right, you could do that, or you could bring it back. You don't have to delete it entirely. You could play around with it later. Entirely up to you. So there we've added a bit of an effect to our situation. Now, the other thing I did want you to show me is a layer style. Now, let me get rid of some of these. Obviously, a lot going on there. And let me bring it back to at least one of these. I'll go with the verb. There we go. And what I could do with layer styles, very simply, is add a simple layer style. If I have this layer selected, okay, this is the one that's on. I'm going to go up to layer and layer styles. And layer styles are very simply what we've seen before. Adding a drop shadow, inner shadow, outer glow, bevel, emboss, all these different ones. I just want to see something simple. Like, what can we do here? Let's add a little bit of a drop shadow. So let's zoom in a little bit so we can see that. Yeah, there's a bit of a drop shadow on there. Well, where does it show up? Well, there it is right there. Under layer styles. Blending options are there. Of course, we can use our global lights, but just go to drop shadow. And now we can play around with the drop shadow. We can play around with the opacity, how much of it we see. We can play around with the distance and how far it goes. We could play around with our spread. We could play around with our size. We could play around with a lot of different things here. And once again, I'm not animating anything. I'm just specifically changing the drop shadow. If I want to animate some of this, I can. Everything has a stopwatch, which is pretty cool. But for now, I just want you to show me a little bit of a layer style, any one of them. And once again, I can go up to layer, or I can right click and click on layer style, and I could add more. So you could add many layer styles to one particular piece, one particular object. Which I'm not going to do, but just to show you that you're able to. You can play around with that, of course, and once again, you can animate those as well. So if you wanted animated distance, you know, say once it actually all came in, and now there is a distance on there. Sorry, there's a drop shadow on there. I could actually say, you know what? Let me animate the distance. So at this point, the distance is 5, and over here now the distance will be more. Let's say, which I don't really agree with, but I'm just showing this to you. So here is my overall animation. And then that kind of drop shadow kind of moves a little bit. You could totally do that. I'm fine with that. I don't love the idea, but just to show you the different things you can do, I'm actually going to kill that animation. There we go. So fix that distance up, get it back to 0, or whatever you want to do. It's entirely up to you. But just to add some type of layer style, I really want you to play around and have some fun with that. The other thing we could do, obviously, in a situation like this as well, we could add some motion blur. So depending on the one you want to use, you could actually, you know, add some blur to this. So this particular animation is happening, I'm going to add motion blur. So there's the motion blur column right there. I'm going to add some motion blur to that. The master motion blur is on. So let's see if that changes up how it animates in. So it actually is going slow. The lag is actually helping us see the motion blur, but let me bring that down to maybe 3rd and see if that helps out at all. So there is a bit of motion blur. It shows us that it makes the animation a little bit smoother, but it definitely helps out in that situation. So what I want to see, yeah, 3 different types of animation. Your rotates, your what do we have here? Our If you want to do an anchor point animation, a position, a scale, an orientation, any 3 types of animation. But obviously here I've done a lot, but I'm not saying everything's going to be on here, but just showing you that within your 20 seconds, I definitely want to see some very interesting things happen. One last thing I want to show you here is on the background. So let's just do a simple effect on the background, because this is another option for you potentially to add an effect in. And so once again, it might be a color correction, and a very popular one to use is Lumetri color, and it just offers so many things. I'm just going to click and drag it over top of the background, and when it shows up here, it's pretty massive what you could do with it. Basic corrections and creative and curves. We're familiar with curves in Photoshop, and a lot you can do. Vignette, and look at all this. You can animate a good majority of all these things. As soon as you see that stopwatch, you know you can animate. So it's pretty cool, all the different things we could do. So you know what, let me play around with this just a little bit, and I'm going to animate it. So over time, I kind of want this picture to change. So let's kind of see what we can do here. Very, very simple. So let's see what a vibrance does. Does a vibrant do anything? I'm going to hold down Shift and see. Does it change it up for me? Pretty much, yeah, it does something simple. So I'm just going to animate that. Let's animate that. So I'm going to click on vibrance right here, and then at the end, I want that vibrance. Now let me open that up, because I actually want to see it here in my panel. And it kind of shows up there. It shows up as a circle. So that's the creative. Yeah, it's under creative. And adjustments. And there it is. So my vibrance. So there it is there. And let's say at the very end, I want it to change up something. There we go. It goes from there. And maybe actually at this keyframe, it's going to go even further back there. So over time, this is going to, oh, I made a new keyframe accidentally. So over time, you're going to see the background change slowly from that very little vibrance to more vibrance, into more and more and more, until we get to the end. Now, ideally, what you might want to actually see is it kind of loop. Well, how would I make it loop? Because now if it comes back, see what happened? It just kind of went back to that harshness of that version of the vibrance to this. So what I could do is actually, maybe what I'll do is I'll make this come halfway at the 10-second mark, say. Okay. And bring it in. And now what I can do is I'm going to bring this back over here. I'm actually going to copy this keyframe. Select it, copy it. I'm going to come over here to the end, and I'm going to Command V, and there it is again. So what it did, actually, it copied exactly this keyframe. It remembered everything this keyframe had, and I put it over here. Now, if I play through it, it's going to go from that minus 100% vibrance. It's going to go to 100% vibrance. And then it's going to go back to, slowly animate back to minus 100 vibrance. And it's actually going to kind of loop, where the beginning is the same as the end. So it's not going to have this hard glitch where it just kind of flips back to that 100%. It's actually going to kind of bring it back. So this keyframe is the exact same as that one, which will kind of help it loop a little bit. So let's take a quick peek and see what I have here. So I had the official release. Let's just say we're going to do that. And let's put one of these fourths in here. Maybe this one, maybe that one actually. Let's see what happens here. Okay. You know what? I don't mind that one. I don't mind that one either. I kind of like the stroke reveal. Maybe I'll use that one. Get rid of this one. And once again, I can move these around. So let me do something here. Nothing is selected. What I'm going to do, I'm going to use a keyframe keyboard shortcut. I'm going to press U, and what actually opens with nothing selected, it opens just the keyframes. It shows all the keyframes that are being used. Press U. If I press U again, shuts them. If I press U, it opens a lot more. I'm just going to press U one more time and U once, and it just shows all my keyframes. So there's a lot going on here. If I don't want something to be seen, obviously I could just twirl it down, or twirl it up, I should say. But let's just say for certain layers, I want to see the keyframes. So that would be the ones that are on. So I'm just going to press U on those ones, and only those ones will show up because I had only those ones selected. Okay, so the fourth, what I want to happen here is like, I don't want it to, sorry, this one here, I don't want it to come in right. I want it to come in after and actually kind of prolong. So when this animation is finished, the other one will show up. And maybe it shows in very slowly. So what I'm going to do is I want this one to go a little bit longer. Maybe say a full 3 seconds. Bring it over here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to just bring this over here. So a little bit further. Let's go to the 3-second mark. Bring it over here. Okay, now I say this kind of stretched out a little bit more. Let me shut this one off. Okay, this is happening. It's going a little slower, but it has that nice little easy ease on it. And then this one's going to show up. And I could even easy ease this one as well. F9 or right click. We know that. Keyframe Assistant and easy ease. And I can always graph edit and use graph editor on that too to really fine tune it. All right, there I go. And now this is happening over time. And the other thing I wanted to mention was I wanted to bring this in just as kind of this consistent thing that's happening. Now, realistically, we should have the last few seconds, let's say the last 18, 2 seconds, 17 to 20 seconds, it should be a flat version of what's happening. Just so the viewer can take it in, simple, nice, and then it can kind of loop over itself. It can kind of happen again. Just so it's kind of rested. But within that first 0 to 17 seconds, I want to see some interest, some animation, even if you kind of shut this one off and another one comes in. So even let's just say, you know, at this point, I'm going to bring this back. So what's happening is this layer, this area is not visible anymore. All right, so if I have that right now, this is going to be visible. Sorry, fourth is going to be visible. And what's happening is as I move over, now it's gone. So what I did was I moved the visibility of that layer over time. But let's just say I want fourth to, actually I'm going to keep that one there. But let's just say I want, sorry, this one to disappear. So after a while, this one's going to shut off right about here. Right when that's done. If I want to, I could fade it out using opacity. And let's say I'll bring another one in. I'll bring in this one here, the range selector one. And what I'm going to do, I'm not going to have it visible the whole time, but what I am going to do is I'm going to move it now over here. And a keyboard shortcut for that, to say I want it to start at this particular CTI where it is right now, I'm going to hold down Option and open bracket, and it actually brings the beginning of it right to where my CTI was, exactly right there, which is great. So I'm just going to move that. And now the other one shows up. Now it looked a little weird because the way it showed up. And it also is not going to work necessarily because the animation happened over here. So what I need to do is click on those keyframes and bring them over. There I go. Where is that? Right about here. Okay, so now let's take a look at that. So that shows up there. That's there. That disappears, and then this one comes in. So we can do that too. I know there's a lot kind of going on. Maybe cohesively, consistently, we might not do something like this, but realistically for this assignment, I'd love for you to try out different things and introduce new ones. So this gives you a way to actually bring in more animation from what I'm asking for without having to create, add more type and more type and more type. So hopefully this helps out. And now what I want to do to finalize the project, let's pretend this is done. We're happy with it. It's good. And I've checked off everything that you needed to do. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to double check, make sure. Okay, even if you have some layers on there you're not going to use, don't delete them, just shut them off. That's fine. I wouldn't mind taking a look at them, but make sure that on the actual artboard, on your composition, everything is there that should be seen. So if you have a 3D effect and you have to check that off and it's not actually seen, well, I actually want it to be seen, not just on your layer panel shut off. So the number one thing I need to do, I need to look at my project panel. Yes, it's organized, looks good, everything's labeled properly, beautiful. The other thing I need to see is I need to see your layers are also organized. And let's even call this one texture. Texture, that's fine, because blending mode texture, that's totally fine. So I want to see properly laid out labels as well. And if you want, to be even more like this, have that, and I select those ones because those ones pertain to the album covers. Maybe I'll make those yellow. If it just the Verve ones are going to be another particular color, aqua, let's say. And official release, let me bring this down here because it's specific to something else. You could change the colors as well, but really that's all I'm looking for is that they're labeled properly, that they're not some random names. And then once you're all done there, what I want, this doesn't matter. This doesn't matter what this is at, because it's like you're playing around. As long as we save it at full, we're good. I'm sorry, render it at full, we're good. Now, normally I ask you to save it under render queue. I'm not going to add that this time. Composition, add to render queue. We're not going to do that. We're actually going to go one step further. We're going to go to add to Adobe Media Encoder. So let's click on that. And what's going to happen is Media Encoder is going to open up. Okay, now what happened? This might take a little bit longer to load. That's fine. What's going to happen here is you're going to be like, okay, maybe if you've never seen Media Encoder, it's okay. Here, the Media browser, don't worry about it. What you could do here is kind of like Adobe Bridge. Files just show up if you ever wanted to encode them, change up the formatting. The preset browser, this is everything that all the presets that are available to you. You could add more, you could change them up, take a look at them. Mainly, this is where we want to focus. We want to focus on the queue and the encoding. So what comes up is this is what we're looking at here. So we see that the album cover, that's what we have, is coming from After Effects, that's exactly what we want. We want H.264, because that's going to be the formatting. We're going to say this time, we're going to actually click on Match Source High Bitrate. So that's more or less what we're looking at. We're going to take a look at that in just a second. But here is the output file. We're going to click on this, and we need to do a couple things here. We need to make sure it's saved in the right place and saved properly. Now, I have to go back and save my project, which I haven't done yet, which is not smart of me. So I'm going to go to my desktop. I'm going to find out where I want to save this, which is going to be under my album cover, my final. That's where I want to put it. So what am I going to name it? Last name, first initial, section number. And I'm going to call this album cover. And that's fine, and I'm just going to say save. Now, this doesn't actually save it, and it is going to be an MP4. It's not going to be an MOV this time. It actually is not going to save it right away. I have to click on this green triangle, but I'm not going to do that yet. So what I can do is go to click on this, the preset, and this shows up, and this gives me a lot of options here and different things I could do. Now, here it is. I could actually play out the animation. Could scrub through it. Nice, I'm happy with that, whatever the case is. So format's going to be H.264. That's going to match the source. So exactly what I did here, it's going to match everything. I could write some comments, change up the output name. If I had audio, didn't want the audio, I could shut it off, but it doesn't matter. There's no audio. I could play around with different options here as well, but I'm just going to go to video. Actually, this is an interesting one. Publish. You could actually publish it directly to Behance, Creative Cloud, Facebook, YouTube. You can put in your information. It's pretty cool. I'm just going to look at video. So what do I have here? Yep, 2000 by 2000, 24 frames per second, aspect ratio good. I could render at maximum depth, a little extra there. I can go through this, and that's fine. I could also use maximum render quality, great. And that's kind of it. It's named properly, it's going to go to the right location. It is H.264, it's going to save it as an MP4, and I just played around with a few extra options here. I'm just going to say okay. Still doesn't save it, still doesn't save it as a video file, MP4 yet. I have to click here. Press on the triangle, green triangle, and now it's just going to go through it. Now 20 seconds, depending on how all the different animations you have and all the kind of craziness going on, it's definitely can take a little bit longer. But the good thing is that while this is happening, I can actually go back here and play around a little bit more. So at least if it's not in render queue will stop everything from happening, and I have to wait for render queue to happen. Once it's in Media Encoder and something takes a really long time, actually I can have the option to go back to After Effects and play around, which is really, really nice. And the one thing I have to do, which I totally forgot to do in After Effects, is save the project. This is very important. You should save often and save in multiple locations. So my apologies if I threw you off there a little bit. So let me go here, once again there, the AEP, nothing in there. So let me make sure I name this properly. Last name, first initial, section number, underscore, and it's going to be album cover. And that's it. Okay. I'm going to save that. So now my folder is saved properly. I have my project in there. My assets are in here. My final is about to be in there, which it shows it's in there, but let's just double check our Media Encoder because it's still going. So it's not done yet. So I shouldn't open that up. Now, really what we should be doing too, at the same time, I should have mentioned this at the beginning, is that you really should design your cover first. Design everything first. How you want your type to be, what the picture is going to look like, all that good stuff. Then once you do that, then you should start thinking, okay, how am I going to animate this? What should I do here? How should I bring this in? What should I do? So that idea, you should kind of play around a little bit more initially with your thumbnail, your design, your ideas, and then bring those together in After Effects and then animate them out later on checking off all the things that I'm asking you to check. So hopefully there's something there could really help you out. Designing it first, and then I kind of did design. I had an idea in my mind first, and then I put it together, and that's what happened there. So the Media Encoder is done. So then now what I can do I can go to my file list and double check on Media Encoder, say, yep, it's done, happy with it. It check mark says, yep, good job. If for some reason I forgot where it was located, I put it in the wrong spot, I can actually click on this link right here and it shows me where it is. It takes me right to it. Perfect. So I'm just going to open this up. I'd like to open this up actually with VLC. I'm a big fan of using VLC. It's a great program. It opens up almost any type of file to view or to watch. So there it is, and here it is. Here is my lovely animation. Great quality. It looks really, really good. 20 seconds. You know, I did a lot of different things in here. My text, my texture overlay looks really good. Picture looks good. Animations look good. Everything looks great. Now, I should have done a lot more animation in there to fill out that 20 seconds, which I did not, which you will. And there I go. It's done. Now, what I can do once again is go to that. And let's look at that file size. 25 or almost 26 megabytes, which actually realistically is not that big. That's actually pretty small, even compared to like a Photoshop file. So that's a pretty cool option there. So there it is. I've done my animation. Album cover looks great. Everything I wanted to is checked off. I did the rendering. I made the video for it in Media Encoder. I use those exact specifications of H.264. It's an MP4. It looks really, really good, and I'm happy with this entirely. I hope this helps for you to create yours, but I definitely want to see a lot more, have a lot more fun with it, play around and see what you can come up with.